So after picking up Gotham Knights on sale on Epic Game Store, I find myself pleasantly surprised with this game. Maybe it was because of the discourse surrounding its launch, but I was surprised about how much I actually enjoyed the game despite what I heard about it. Now let's get the obvious out of the way. I am playing this game 9 months after its launch, and the reason why this is important is because with regards to the game's performance, the game ran very, very well. Running on my PC, max settings, I achieved full 60 frames per second, the whole bells and whistles. The game ran magnificently on my rig, and of course, because this is 9 months later, they've had the extra time to iron out the kinks or whatever issues on the performance side that may have been present at launch. So my experience may differ from those who actually played the game on launch as opposed to playing it now, 9 months later. Without further ado, though, let's get into the specifics of the game itself. First and foremost, one of the things that I liked about Gotham Knights is you do have the choice of characters. There are 4 characters: Batgirl, Nightwing, Robin, and Red Hood. And you get to choose between any of these 4 characters virtually any time you are not in a mission. Once you are in a mission, you are stuck with that character for the duration of the mission, but you can swap in and out in between them. Now, I sampled all 4 characters, and I ended up maining Batgirl because she was the most well-rounded in terms of jack of all trades. But my second favorite would then be Red Hood because of the way he plays. He's more of a powerhouse slash long range kind of character. The thing to make note of is even though you can swap between the 4 characters, it is recommended that you stick with one. And the reason for this is in order to unlock all of the suits, in order to unlock the knighthood skill tree, which is the last skill tree that is locked, it is recommended that you play as one character all the way through, because if you do swap back and forth continuously, you won't be able to achieve that last tier for all the characters anyways. So what I would recommend for those is, maybe try a mission for each one of the 4 characters and then make your final choice of who you want to main as you go. As I spoke about before, since this is 9 months later, the graphics of the game looked good. Did it look as good as Batman the Arkham series on max settings? No, but it still looked good nonetheless, and I still enjoyed the visuals of the game. Obviously, the next thing I like about this game is the opening mission. The opening mission does a good job of being like a tutorial and explaining the fundamentals if you're not familiar with this type of game. As for the story of Gotham Knights, well, the story is obviously Batman dies right at the beginning, hence why you're the Knights and not Batman himself. The main story, I thought it was okay. I thought the story was good, nothing special. What really carries the story in Gotham Knights is the actual Knights themselves and the interactions between the 4 characters, as well as Alfred, when you're in between the missions. Like you see them grow on how when the game first starts they want to do things on their own, they all have their own ways of doing things, and how they come together at the end of the game in order to achieve their end goal. So from a story standpoint, I do think that the shining star is the individual characters and the 4 main characters on how they come together versus the actual trying to solve what happened. And the last big positive that I really liked, and I thought this was really, really cool, and I don't say this often, is the fast travel animation in this game. Whenever you fast travel, you get this very cool animation that transitions right into mid-game. And it is a really cool animation that, I wish more games did something like that. Instead of just like closing the camera, black screen, load up, and then in you go. They do have a nice, cool animation. So I thought, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really, really cool, and it stood out to me. As for the gameplay and how this game plays, well, let's start things off with the combat. The combat is, well, just okay. And the reason why I say the combat is just okay is while the 4 knights do play differently, and they all have their different fighting styles, The elephant in the room for me was that the combat just wasn't as good as the Arkham series. Like, an example of this is there's no counter button in this game. You can dodge, but there's no counter button. Whereas if you come from the Arkham games, you can dodge and you have a counter button. So the fact that, in my opinion, from the inputs and the core mechanics of combat, it's actually a step back from what the Arkham series offered. Right? The only saving grace is that you have four knights. And I think the issue was because they created four separate characters and they had to kind of like spread out the abilities across four characters, it actually kind of hindered the game in comparison to Arkham, because Arkham, you only play as Batman, so he gets all the tricks and tricks and abilities and all of that. So it kind of felt like a step back to me in comparison to the Arkham series, but it was still okay nonetheless. The other, half decent issues comes with the game's customization. I felt that, cosmetically speaking, the game does a really good job. There's a lot of cool suits. You can customize each individual part to give a certain look for the character, and that aspect is cool. You even have your skills and your skills trees for each character, which again helps make each character different and helps each character play to your own style. The problem I have, it comes with the form of the crafting. The crafting is very, very basic. There's a handful of materials. You can, this breaks them down for more materials to unlock new upgrades. And it's really just like the top upgrade that you want, boom, equip that one. And that was it. Like, it's just from a customization mechanically, it was nothing special in comparison to what other games offer. The other issue I had in game is that there are some puzzles in the game, but the puzzles themselves weren't overly complex. There was nothing really special about them. It was very simple, and it didn't really deter from the experience, but it didn't really make it feel like, hey, you're a detective like Batman or anything like that. It was just like puzzles for puzzles' sake kind of thing. And as for like the really big negatives, I had three major negatives with Gotham Knights. And the first major negative comes in the form of its repetitive mission structure. And what I mean by that is the main story is broken up into 8 parts, and each part follows the exact same formula. You have the part A of it, which is go on patrol, collect some form of intelligence, and then you go to the second part of it, which would go into some building of some kind, go in there, do your thing, and that's the end of the mission, on to the next chapter. And it repeats that A-B formula all the way through. It doesn't change. You patrol, then you go into a building. You patrol, you go into a building. That never changes. And this is compounded even worse by the second biggest issue, and that is the dated open world formula. You have, for example, to fast travel from point to point, you have to go to an area, scan some drones, and the way you go, unlock kind of like a tower of Assassin's Creed, and you do this multiple times over. And then they also have these caches that give you resources. Same thing. Go to the cache, follow its path, complete its path. Here's your reward. You have time travels with the bike. The exact same thing. It's literally the dated open world formula that we're used to seeing, where you can do this stuff if you want, you can skip it if you want. It's a dated formula, and combined with a repetitive mission structure, it does get a little stale by the end of the game. The last big issues I had with the game is, despite having a lot of cool characters, there's only one real boss fight at the very end of the game with regards to the main story. There are some side missions that do involve bosses, but in terms of the main story, there's only one boss at the very end of it. That's it. Like, you have your final boss segment, there's 3 stages to it, and that's it. And even then, the boss fight itself, although how it impacts the narrative of the game I think was pretty cool, the actual boss fight itself was nothing special, nothing that stood out to me. It was just cool from the narrative perspective, not from a gameplay perspective. And it was kind of like a little bit of a letdown in a way, because I'm like, there's so many good Batman villains that I would have liked to have some more of them incorporated in the main story to allow for more diversity. Instead, they're relegated to all side missions, which is another issue in my opinion. But, to each his own. Overall, though, I enjoyed my time with the game. I wouldn't recommend buying this game at full price if for some reason it still is at full price. I personally purchased the game at just over $20 Canadian for it. It was like $15 US or something like that. So if you're gonna buy the game, I would recommend it definitely under the $30 price tag. This is definitely worth checking out. One thing to make note is I played the game entirely solo. You can play the game cooperatively. I didn't bother to do so, as I always view these games as a single player experience. So to be forewarned, I only did play it single player. But for me, for $30 or less, I think the game is worth checking out, especially if you're a Batman fan. If any more than that, you're getting into that territory where it may not be worth your financial commitment, depending on how you feel, especially if you're a fan of the Arkham trilogy, because the Arkham trilogy was so good as a Batman game that this game, although it does a couple good things about it, it really is a major step back from those games. The last thing, and I wanted to touch on it before I forgot about it, is with the bike itself. And the bike itself, man, it lacks speed. You're driving around the city and it doesn't feel like you're going fast. They try to create the effect that you're going fast, but you're really, really not going fast. And to put this into comparison, when you compare it to the Arkham games, especially the last one, Arkham Knight, where you got your Batmobile and you get to drive around, that felt quick. It's playing Spider-Man and swinging through the city. That felt fast. This, it simulates speed, but it doesn't feel like you're going fast. And it was just a knock that it disturbed me whenever I was on the bike. I'm like, it doesn't feel like I'm going fast, even though it should. But overall, from front to back, I did enjoy my time with Gotham Knights. I did have fun with it. I recommend it on a sale price of about $30 or less, nothing more than that. Definitely worth checking out. I'd give Gotham Knights a 7.5 out of 10. This is Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.